We're in the TechCrunch studio today with Aditya Julka, who's a co-founder of Paddle8. Aditya, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me here.
So you guys are based in New York, so welcome to San Francisco. And tell us a little about what Paddle8 is. I know you guys are in the art world.
So Paddle8 sort of, in web speak, is an online marketplace. But in terms of the art world, what we are is an online auction house. So it's kind of like the big auction houses, but online. And we do two kinds of auctions on the platform. One are what we call benefit auctions, where we work with hundreds of museums, foundations, nonprofits worldwide, really, who sort of traditionally held one-day auctions, their traditional galas that we've now brought online and that we sort of market to our entire community. But we also do a second kind of auction, which is called a themed auction, where sort of anyone really can consign inventory that they purchased before onto the platform, and we would auction it off with a particular theme in a sale. So those are the two kinds of auctions we do, but really we're an online auction house just like a big Sotheby's, Christie's, or Phillips.
Got it. And so how does, for people who maybe don't understand that world, how does art move around from the artist to the gallery to the collector or to the auction house and then into this new market that you've created?
No, absolutely, and I think that's a great point. So the way the art world works is very different, I think, than many other sort of industries. And sort of I came from outside the art world, so it's been a learning curve for me as well. But traditionally what happens is that an artist would create a piece of art. It would then go to a gallery which is representing that artist. And sort of that gallery would market the artist, sort of make sure the right collectors get to see those artworks and really establish credibility for the artist as sort of an artist of note. So that is where what we call the primary market. So that is how sort of the first sale of an artwork by that artist happens. What happens then is that sort of if the collector who buys that artwork wants to resell that piece of art, there's only really 2 or 3 avenues available to them. And so the first thing that most collectors try to do is to go back to the gallery that they bought the artwork from and sort of sell the artwork back to that gallery. But in most cases, that may or may not work out. And
they may have to either pay a higher commission or lose money on the sale?
Exactly, because sort of the gallery is sort of trying to sell new works by the same artist along with this old work that you're trying to resell. So there's not a lot of incentive sometimes for them to focus on this particular work and so in that case, what the collector would do is they would traditionally go to an auction house. And by auction house, I mean a Christie's or a Phillips or a Sotheby's, which are some of the biggest auction houses in the world. But again, if the price of work that you're trying to sell is below $100,000, the high commission structure, even as a seller, you pay as much as 25% commission for reselling that piece of art, sometimes makes it sort of not very economic for you to resell through that avenue. And that's where Paddle8 comes in. So for artworks at price points below $100,000, our commission structures are by far the lowest, and we provide a very liquid, transparent market for you to sell.
And you feel like the web enables that marketplace, whereas in the past it wouldn't have enabled that?
Yes, absolutely. So traditionally, that market would have been held by a lot of the smaller regional auction houses. But the web enables us to get much broader scale and reach collectors across the world who might be interested in that inventory. And really sort of enables us to form those connections globally between art collectors who are interested in different pieces of art. And that hasn't been possible before because this market has traditionally been served by very regional auction houses.
Got it. So tell us a little bit about the company. You guys are headquartered in New York. You've got about 20 people.
Yep.
How did you guys start? When did you start? And then when did you and your co-founders feel like, hey, we're kind of on to something?
No, absolutely. So we started the company in May of 2011, and sort of the first idea that we started with wasn't the auction construct. It was more traditional lead generation based on gallery inventory. But what happened is we got approached by a couple of museums who said that, look, we're having this gala auction. Do you mind putting it online and holding a pre-auction for us so that we can reach a broader audience? Because we just don't want to depend on that one-day auction. And we held the first auction, and we saw the bids start coming in. And we were just amazed by the pace at which this bidding was happening. And we raised, I think, $200,000, $300,000 worth of bids in literally 24 hours. And we were like, there may be something here. And so we started approaching more and more nonprofits. And then last year, we did about 80 of these benefit auctions and raised over $10 million in bids. And so it really made us realize that there's a huge appetite for this kind of sort of a purchase mechanism for art online. In that way, we then acquired one of our competitors in the space called Blacklots last fall, which was headquartered in Los Angeles, and sort of acquired their specialist teams, and based on that started sort of expanding beyond the benefit auctions into what I was referring to earlier, the themed auctions, which are literally like an auction at a big auction house. So that's been kind of the evolution for how we sort of got into the space.
And so as you went from sort of, let's say, lead gen classified into this more online marketplace model, what did you find were like the toughest things about creating the marketplace, right? Because a lot of people, let's say around here, creating all sorts of different marketplaces, right?
Absolutely.
They go through this chicken and egg problem, or how to get liquidity on both sides, right?
Yeah.
So everyone here, for example, just says like, oh, it's really hard to compete with Craigslist because any request or any bid that you put out there is received very quickly. And so people trying to attack different parts of Craigslist, have a really hard time getting both sides on. How were you able to, in your marketplace, get both sides together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sort of again, so in this marketplace, and it's kind of unique to the art world in general, I feel, we always struggled with sort of like which is the harder nut to crack, the supply side or the demand side. In the lead generation model, what we'd done we had grown that enough where we worked with about 400 galleries around the world, and we worked with about 8 art fairs globally. We worked with sort of hundreds of these benefits. And so we already had a pretty robust pool of collectors who sort of were buying a lot of inventory from us. So we knew that sort of like the nut to crack for us in many ways was to get the right supply on the platform, because art collectors are a pretty passionate bunch. And if you have something that they sort of are interested in and sort of want to buy, they're pretty channel agnostic in terms of the retail channel it comes from. Because the other thing you have to keep in mind is, unlike sort of other sort of objects or widgets where sort of you could buy something online, but you could also go into a store and buy it. If this is a particular unique painting by a particular artist, there's only one of these in the world. So if you're interested in this, you will buy it wherever it exists. You don't have a second choice.
Sure.
So we focus pretty hard on the inventory problem and sort of like really sort of trying to focus on getting great inventory on the platform. And that's where sort of we've had a lot of success now.
And by doing that would have the gravitational pull to pull in all the right people.
Absolutely. People find us. Actually, we do very little marketing, but sort of the collectors who sort of buy certain artworks hear about us organically. Yeah. And we get sort of really established collectors who traditionally have bought at auction, now coming onto the platform and buying through us.
Great. So I think just to shift gears a little bit as we wrap up, and I think you have a very interesting background, it'd be great to share with the audience like how you started in entrepreneurship in a totally different field.
Yeah.
And sort of had this quick path. I mean, it's off topic from art, but I think it's an interesting story. So tell us a little bit. I guess you had your first startup when you were 21?
Yeah. So this is my third company. My previous 2 startups were both in healthcare and both in biology, and so that's kind of my background.
Yeah.
My last startup was funded by Excel, and we sold that in 2010. And I had just moved to New York. I'd finished business school, moved into a new apartment, was looking to buy art. And that's how I tried walking into a gallery, and it was one of the most intimidating things I'd done. So I realized that I knew very little about this industry and sought out someone to teach me about how to acquire art. And that's how I met my co-founder. So.
And then for those two, let's say broadly health space companies that you had founded, what's been the hardest thing as like an entrepreneur who's doing a marketplace online? Like,
yeah,
because obviously you're entrepreneurial by nature, but what have you found more difficult or more competitive about the space that you're in currently?
No, absolutely. I think the learning curve for me personally has been just one of the steepest learning curves I've ever been on. And the reason for that is because you're learning about an industry that's pretty complex and pretty intricate, and at the same time you're also trying to form the right relationships within that industry that give you scale. What we've been really lucky by is my co-founder comes from the industry and already had a huge set of relationships that we could leverage. And some of our investors, again, bring those relationships. But for me personally, I think that's been the most fun as well as the most challenging part, which is really getting up to speed on how this industry functions, but also then forming the key relationships that really move this industry.
Right.
So it's been a fun ride.
And so final question would be is, let's say for someone in the audience out there who's starting their own kind of unique marketplace online, or they have some industry knowledge and want to say, hey, this should be online, what kind of advice would you give them? Right, because you guys did a lot of research.
Totally, yeah.
And have a lot of your own relationships. What kind of advice would you give someone out there who wants to do something like Paddle8, but for their own industry?
I think the first question they should ask themselves, and this is something that we really were very, very hard on ourselves on, is if this is truly a marketplace that deserves to be served, why isn't Amazon or eBay servicing it? So what are the reasons some of the bigger companies haven't gone after these marketplaces? Okay. And in art, there's 100 reasons why those guys haven't gone after it yet. And it's a pretty niche controlled industry with a lot of relationship-based things. And so we knew the answers to those for our industry, but for someone starting a new marketplace, I would ask them to be critical and just make sure that there's something unique about that industry that makes them the right people to solve that problem in a way.
Great. Well, Aditya, thanks for coming in, and congratulations on all the success.
Thank you so much, Semil. Thank you for having me here.